Oh,
Hi,
hi, Merle.
Hi,
how are
Hi.
you?
Good. Good
how
to
are
see
you
every.
all?
All is good.
That's
Good
the
here.
most important and nice thing to hear.
That's
Thank you.
great. Don't take it for granted.
Uh-uh.
Uh-uh. Not at this time of the life.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's nice to be with you all. I know some of you I got to study with back a few months ago, but now I get to be in the regular rotation, so I'm thrilled. It looks like Susan is trying to get to sound, but that's okay. That's okay. Um, it's really fun for me being new here to get to come in to Torah study with, especially this week with this absolutely bonkers Torah portion, which is really, really fun. But I thought before we would do that, I would love it. I know many of you are very, very regular Torah study people. But I would love it. We have there's a lot of good Torah to get to today, but I would appreciate it if we could just kind of quickly, so that we can get to the Torah, but hop around. We'll have an opportunity to get to know each other through the study a little bit more, but maybe if you could just share who you are and what your favorite, why you participate with Torah study, and what your favorite thing about Torah study is. And you can just unmute and talk over each other until we figure out that beautiful awkwardness of Zoom. Helen, go ahead. Oh, except you're muted. You need to unmute.
Hello?
Perfect.
Can you?
Hi.
Okay. I started to study Torah when I retired. All what I learned from Torah was from my parents. In the country where I grew up, we didn't have Torah study.
Where
We
did you
also
grow up?
did what?
Where did you grow up?
In South America, in Paraguay.
Right.
So there was no temple there. We had Bechtube. I don't know if you know what that is. That's uh, they rented a room, and for the high holidays, a rabbi came from Argentina, and for the rest of the lay people that knew
That's
that,
great.
yes.
That's great. So
Anyway,
Torah study, why? Because you're retired.
yes.
Man, good answer. Good answer.
Can I just say Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi? Hello.
Shabbat Shalom, welcome. I'm just would love to just quickly so we can get to Torah, but it's pains me because if we had all day, I'd love to take a lot more time. Just who are you and what is it about Torah study that brings you back? Anybody?
Your personality.
Cindy, go
Let me
ahead.
all depend to
Yeah.
this lady Madonna. Everybody on this Zoom, I just love so much Susie and everybody. And
Yeah, you got good. So
yeah,
donut. So perhaps it's the people and that you get to study with. Yeah.
it charges my battery. That's all I gotta say.
I love it. Love it. Cindy, go ahead.
I too had always promised myself when I retired, I would read the Torah, and I retired 2 years ago, but it was offered with Rabbi Davids, who's so amazing that I've been studying with him for 6 years, and it brings up as many questions about the origins of the Torah, and I think the fact that it can be presented that scholars wrote it, not God giving it at Mount Sinai, is easier for me to enjoy that there's stories that were created to create a back history for us. And I'm enjoying it as stories.
Fantastic. And yet there's
So much in there.
whatever you want to call them, there's still so much that's real. Yeah, that's great. Merle, go ahead.
So I guess being a lifelong member of Wilshire, Torah study was just always religious school Torah study services it was just always a part of my life. And having worked for synagogues the majority of my life until I retired, I think 15 years ago, when Gabby was born, I felt that I don't want it to end. So between this and our temple here and CCAR and a bunch of other places that I've always been involved in, it's very exciting for me to be able to learn with a group, study with a group, and learn from each other.
Great. Awesome. Susan. First of all, I just also have to say that being on Zoom with your names is kind of like sitting around the table with name placards. It's great, but I will get to know them anyway, even without the names.
Well, I like that too. It's a benefit for me, certainly, more so. But I started Women's Torah with Rabbi Fox, Karen Fox, years ago. She started at the temple and I loved it. It wasn't every Friday, but it was every other. And we had a nice group of women there and I just loved it. And then Susan Namas, Rabbi Namas took over and I loved it again. And then Zoom came about and I love that too. And I just think it's part of my life, as with Merle. And I grew up in a temple, but we didn't study Torah particularly in the temple. I grew up in Pasadena or at the Jewish camp at Tess Kramer, where I knew Merle, who's younger than me. But I should say that.
No, I'm having a birthday in a month. So
Oh, good for you.
Happy birthday.
What, 35, is that it?
yeah, right. More like the
35.
5 with a 7 in front of it.
Yeah. Well, good for you. And then I went on and studying with Milton, a number of courses, and with AJU, which is no more, but they had a very, there's one class, but they had a very vibrant program and I just loved it. So,
This
and
is
I
good.
like this
You
group.
love it, so you do more and more and more. Great. Benjamin, is it Benjamin or yeah?
Ben, it's all good. Rabbi, thank you. So when I first retired, I kind of agree with what everybody said about retiring and then studying and reconnecting. But when I first retired, I wanted to go to the Daily Minyan. But our Reform synagogue wasn't really available. And then, of course, COVID. And then this became available. And for me, it's really helped me become more in touch with my spirituality, which I'm kind of always trying to connect with. And being linked to the synagogue, it's really helped me get a further connection. I've met all these people, and some of the wonderful people here I've met also in person when COVID was over at services, which has been so delightful. And what else did I put down? Connecting. Yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, Zoom is great, but then when you
Zoom
get
is
to
great.
see people in 3 dimensions, it's really it's great. Fantastic. Anybody else want to share before we dive in? Yes, Kanina.
Okay, I started watching and using the computer only when I came to California 4 years ago. So the magic of touching a button and seeing everybody and hear everybody's point of view and life stories sometimes and things are like a marvel to me. So I just love it. And also it brings the Torah to everyday's life.
Absolutely.
So here I am.
That's
I
amazing.
was a
And maybe
teacher
that's like
for
a
50 years.
for 50 years?
Hebrew teacher
Hebrew,
in
amazing.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, that's great. That's
Right.
great. So maybe that's actually a good lead in because many of you have talked about Torah, part of the beauty of Torah study as learning from each other. And it is a nice lead in. So those who haven't introduced, please do later in the context of your comments to the Torah. But the question that gets raised in the Torah portion we're about to look at is, I mean, there are many questions raised, but primarily about the thing that I'm struck with this week is prophecy. And what does it mean to be a prophet? And if you remind me that I made this connection from learning to each other at the end, because I'll probably forget, I think that there's something to that. So we are going to, I promise, look at the text just momentarily, but does anybody just off the top of your head want to take a shot at what is a prophet? Nina, go ahead.
Okay. A prophet. The way I was taught, my teacher was Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda, and his opinion was that there were very smart people who assessed the situation of the days and warned the people that their behavior there is going to be consequences to their behavior. So there weren't people that were doing magic. And of course, because they were always pinpointing the worst, they weren't very loved.
Right.
So there was a lot of scrutiny about where they coming from and where they get their information, which was very logical and very reality assessment. So to me, it was just learning from their prophecy, which we call today, what the situation was at the time within the people that awarded these warnings and they're speaking to the people.
Great.
So
not an easy job.
yeah, and it has like even the word in Hebrew, Navi, it's actually what will come, what will happen. The word will be, it's like the future, Navi, what will be coming to the people.
Yes.
What will be happening.
Future oriented.
It's something, yeah, yeah.
And
But building
often
always
not
on the
good
present
news.
situation.
And say
So
that again.
listen and we read the story, we could also see history of what was going on at the time that awarded this particular prophecy, which we call prophecy today. That's
Okay.
all.
Very helpful. Great. Thank
Okay.
you. Jonathan, go ahead.
Well, so I think basically conceptually, like a prophet, my understanding is that it's like an explainer of a mystery. And so, like, a mystery is something that is unknown, that you can't know unless you have some sort of insider knowledge, be it talent or intuition or specific knowledge, history with a subject or something. And so a prophet is like a guy who has some sort of talent or intuition or logic or connection with God or spiritual whatever, who he can tell you something about a situation that other people are not going to be able to tell you about that situation unless they have that same kind of knack or power or connection or whatever that he has. That's what I've always thought of a prophet as being, like conceptually. And then historically, like a prophet, like, there were the ages of the patriarchs where in Genesis, where the words are all kind of confused. You're not really sure. But then when it gets to Moses, it's like there's priests and there's prophets and all. And well, then after Moses, there's this period of the judges. And like Eli was the last of like the judges. And starting with Samuel, you had from Samuel to Ezra, you have kind of like this age of the prophets, where the prophets sort of were the fulcrum or the pivot or the basis of the culture or whatever, I guess you could say. And then and then it moved on to the rabbis
They've
after
always
that.
been around. They've always been around, to your point. And I find it really interesting because you're talking about a prophet as the person with, or the being, the guy, as you said, the guy with the information, some sort of insider track for the information that people need to have. And Penina was talking about the prophet as in terms of what the prophet spoke. So I love those two pieces, not what the prophet spoke, but the prophet who had something to speak, right? Because there is something about receiving information and communicating information that's going to come back when we look at the Torah portion. Do you want to set the record straight, Penina? Did I misquote you?
I want to simplify all this. There is one of the prophets, or most of them, saw what was going on. For example, when the Israel and Yehuda were split, when the country was divided, literally that they had two kings.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there was a prophecy that there is going to be a third party who is going to come in and conquer the land because of the division, and they're going to be in trouble. There is going to be an exile. And it wasn't anything that somebody saw in a vision. It's something that was happening. There were a division between Israel and Yehuda. There were two kings. There was supposed to be one king in Israel. There was two kings. So that division prompted one of the judges, one of the prophets to, or maybe even more than one, to tell the people that they're going to be conquered this way because they are not united, and there is going to be an exile, and that's or not, I wouldn't say an exile, but I would say a terrible thing happening, and the land is going to perish, and that's exactly what happened.
Right. So you raise the question, the point, very good, very, very important point. And to go back to Jonathan's thing about the guy who's got something to some information.
Anything, even though they use those words.
Well, the
because
question
those words were
is
supposed to impress the people to listen to them.
right.
They were used to be before believing in that one God. They were used to people coming up, and they were called false prophets, who would say that they saw visions and they did that and they saw this, but that was the language that the people understood. From believing in the idols, people were talking about these visions and pictures and things like that. So in order to appease the people, to have them listen to them, maybe the language was a language of hocus pocus, but it was actually a reality that was supposed to be learned from that vision. And that reality was what happened, the exile.
Right.
So the language that they used was something that they thought the people will understand. But the cause of the visions was actually what was happening.
Right. So it's what's
the
happening.
Story was something that was happening.
So it was happening. So it does bring us back to the question of where the insights, we'll call it the insights, insights of the prophets came from. Was it the word of God, or was it that they had their eyes open to what was already happening around them, to your point? And that's going to, again, come back when we look at our Torah portion.
Rabbi, may I ask you a question quickly?
Sure. Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, about prophets. Rabbi Nana says that when they say something, it happens, that's a powerful voice, and they never fallacy. Like they don't say something that doesn't happen, and then they're a false prophet. But I have a question, okay? Because I asked Rabbi Nana, I was sitting in my apartment, it's a little short story. I was sitting in my apartment, I go, oh God, sabotage Putin's pipelines, he's such a Nazi. Bottom line, broke through the news coverage from Spectrum, someone has sabotaged Putin's pipelines, we don't know who. I go, oh my God. I didn't do nothing. I just made a statement. Then where I used to live, there used to be a toilet where the kids OD'd in the bathroom. I said, they need to get rid of it. They didn't call Mayor Bass. I just made a statement. I voiced it. 5 days later, a bulldozer was turning that bathroom down. I have a question. Why is this happening when you say something? Rabbi Nance said, be careful what you say. Speak good things. Speak love and kindness. And the universe and Adam and I will take care of it. Because Rabbi Cantor Peacock said, we have powerful voices to use them for good. That's what I'm going to say. I'm done now. Thank you for listening. That's my.
Well, you've got amazing clergy, apparently, because they tell you really important things, and it's
Yeah,
true.
that's what I'm saying. Rabbi
We
Nance, the
have to
Cantor
be, right, we
you.
do have to be very thoughtful about the things that we speak. And we've all heard of false prophets from the biblical times, but people talk about false prophets today. And so one of the questions, what makes a prophet? And therefore, the inverse is what is not a real prophet. But we can only really answer that question when we understand prophecy in all of its kind of nuanced different ways of understanding it. Susan, go
And
ahead.
one last
Yeah.
thing,
Oh,
Rabbi
hold on one
Leah,
second.
I want to say.
Susan, Jonah, hold on one second. Susan's had
Okay.
her hand up for a while.
Yes, I want to say, we need to mention prophets feel the word of God. It's not just what's going to happen. And generally, most of them don't want to be a prophet. They don't want to be called. And the other thing is they're not well liked, usually, because they usually tell consequences. And that's what's key there. If you behave like this, then these are the consequences. And what Lady Madonna said too, we had heard before, if it comes true, then it's a true prophet. If it doesn't come true, it isn't. But they have to have the word of God coming to them, and they have to be able to tell truth to power. And they're generally not liked. Jeremiah was imprisoned. Some others were stoned and driven out, what they say people don't want to hear. And then there are some visions. Ezekiel has some of the most weird visions I've ever read about.
Ezekiel, the psychedelic prophet, yes.
Visions as well. So, and then the false prophets have also influenced people like Shabbatai Zvi. They often come at times of great turmoil. And Balak, which we're going to get into, we'll see as a false prophet. But anyway, those are generally the terms that I have learned of prophecy. And Jonah didn't want to be a prophet, and mainly because he didn't prophesy. He prophesied earlier something that did not come true, and he wasn't believed. And then he didn't want to go to Nineveh because he was afraid that might not come true. So I mean, there are.
Right, the applications, the resumes were not flying in when the job posting for prophet.
That's correct. They said, not me.
No, right, it was not an easy job.
No.
And the term prophet does not exist squarely, as you just referenced, does not exist squarely in the biblical realm. And so that's why the question, even it sounds like a scholarship question, it's actually not. Scholarship, yes, and Torah study, yes, and study of the Bible, yes, but really it's a question that is very important for us in our world, literally today, in this moment that we're living in. Benjamin, go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi. I just thinking, about what a prophet is, and this may sound wacky, so I'll make it short.
The prophets were the wackiest, so go for it.
But could one say somebody like Albert Einstein is a prophet because he could see things that nobody else could see, or other great, I don't want to say scientists or business geniuses, I don't like them, but Henry Ford or Bill Gates, were they prophets and this is Torah study, but of a different kind?
I am going to ask a favor. Can you make sure we give 3 minutes to come back to that at the end of our conversation and try and answer that? Because I'm happy to throw out an answer. I'm also happy to say, what do you all think? But I think that what we're going to look at might help to answer that. But I want you to remind me. Please, will you do that? Okay, excellent. All right, Nina, last comment. Then
yeah. My teacher used to say when he introduced the point where we were about to study them, he said that the prophets were acting as the conscience of the people.
In the highest, yes, as they should be. And let's use that as a jumping point then. Acting in the highest conscience of the people, there's a lot of power in that. if we all turn our mind over to the notion that the prophets are acting in they are the manifestation of all of our highest consciousness, that for the people is putting all of the power into, I mean, for them to define what our highest consciousness is. And what happens when somebody who isn't a real prophet comes in and holds that power? That's really, really scary. So glad you put it. The question when we look at our Torah portion is whether Bil'am, the person that, one of the main characters of this Torah portion, whether he's a prophet, right? And I want us to be thinking about what is he seeing and what is he hearing? And then if we're thinking about the eyes and the ears of the prophet, so too, how do that's input. What's the output of the eyes and the ears of the prophet? So I'm going to share before I know that this group knows the blessing. So let's join together in the blessing for Torah study. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech
haolam asher
Asher
kishar
kishanu b'mitzvotav,
b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
v'tzivanu
la'asok
la'asok
b'divrei Torah.
Torah.
I love the Zoom cacophony of that blessing, that we should soak ourselves in the words of Torah. So, all right. So here we are, a little bit of background. I know this Torah portion is familiar to many, but I don't want to take it for granted. The Israelites, as I feel like most Torah portions can start this, or most descriptions can start this way. They're wandering through the wilderness. They are tired. They are exhausted. They've been at this for a really long time. And the camera pans away from the Israelites for this bit of this Torah portion, because it turns to we hear that the Israelites are wandering and they're growing and they're gaining strength, and because this is the nature of their journey, they're wandering through the lands of some of these other peoples. This is how they have to get there. There's no going around, right? They have to go through the lands of these other peoples, and they're winning battles, and they're strong. The Moabite king by the name, actually, I'll stop sharing to give a little background. The Moabite king by the name of Balak, and it's for him that the Torah portion is named. This is Parshat Balak. He is afraid of them because they're about to come into his territory. So he goes and he hires the best soothsayer that money can buy by the name of Balaam. And Balaam is really the person, not Balak, the namesake. I know it can be confusing, the namesake of the Torah portion, but Balaam, the person that he hires to curse the Israelites, is this questionable prophet. So now, neither of them are part of the Israelite people. That's a separate conversation. But Balaam is hired for this job, right? He's like foolproof, guaranteed win on the cursing scheme, ratio. He's ready to curse them, and God, he sees God, he hears from God, and God says, you don't do this to my people. You don't do this to my people. So I'm just giving background to the verses we're going to look at. Balak says, oh, no. I hired you for a reason. I'm going to send even more influential people, dignitaries, to convince you to go and curse these people. I mean, Balak is terrified of what they're going to do. Okay, so that's where we come into the verses we're about to look at. And so Balaam gets convinced. God has said, don't go do this. Balaam gives in to the stronger, the more important dignitaries. And he says, all right, we're going to go. Nina, before we jump in, do you want to just throw something else in?
Yeah, his name was Bil'am, not Balak.
Bil'am, and it's
which
right.
actually means without a nation.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. without an
Bli-am.
like
Yeah.
Am Yisrael. Great. Thank you for pointing that out. Bil-am, I'll say it that way, even though for some reason the English translation is often with an A. When he arose in the morning, Bil-am saddled his ass and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. These are the guys who came and convinced him to go. But God was incensed at his going. So a messenger of Adonai took a position in his way as an adversary. He was riding on his she-ass, his donkey, with his 2 servants alongside, when the ass caught sight of the messenger of Adonai standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. So here's this messenger of God standing in the intersection. He's at a red light and he's standing at this intersection with the sword in his hand. The ass, the donkey, swerved from the road and went into the fields, and Bilam beat the ass to turn her back to the road. Okay. Not done. The messenger of Adonai then stationed himself in a lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. The ass, seeing the messenger of Adonai, pressed herself against the wall and squeezed Bilam's foot against the wall, so he beat her again. Okay. Detour number 2. Once the messenger of Adonai moved forward and stationed himself on a spot so narrow that there was no room to swerve right or left, when the ass now saw the messenger of Adonai, she lay down under Bilam, and Bilam was furious and beat the ass with his stick. Okay, I want to stop there for a moment. 3 times, Bilam takes a stick, hits the donkey, hits the ass, because he wants the donkey to go. The light has turned green. It is time to go, and he can't understand why the donkey's not going. Okay, thoughts, questions, reactions so far? Ben, go ahead.
Thank you. Was this messenger like a person with a sword, or like an angel, or some burning bush type of entity? I don't know if that's even relevant, but I'm just
No,
curious.
it's very relevant. I'm glad you raised it. The Hebrew is malach, which is the same word that is like the burning bush type. This word comes back and back, and really it means messenger. It's a messenger of God. So we could all draw pictures of what we think, what image comes to our mind.
The
but
women's commentary uses angel.
It does use angel. Okay, yes, that's a word that's often used for that. But it in literal Hebrew is the translation messenger. So those words get used, both words get used, which raises the question of what this messenger with the big sword in his hand actually looked like, if at all. Susan.
First of all, I was wrong with the Balam and Balak. I said the wrong thing for each one. So but Panina saying it's Bilam now makes it a little more clear for me, because those 2 names are and maybe that's a reason for having them so much alike. I always got confused between Balaam and Balak. And then this has been one of the most confusing passages to me. It's like Aesop's fables, particularly when the donkey, the she-ass, as they say, says, you know, why are you doing this to me? You know, the animal talks. And we see that before with the Nahash in the Garden of Eden. And I know it's been explained that some of this is Bilam being so stupid or unseeing that an animal can see God, this angel before the so-called prophet can. And this suggests that he's not really a prophet. But how would you explain that talking animal?
Well, this is where those are the next few verses. This is like the most cartoonish part of our Torah. I was just I was on the phone last night with somebody from my prior congregation, and I said, oh yeah, I'm looking at the Torah portion. It was great because he was getting ready for a board meeting that I wasn't going to. So I was studying Torah, and he said, oh, this is the part of I can't stand this section of the Torah. It's ridiculous. But the more I look at it, like most of Torah, the more I see there's so much wisdom in it, because Susan, you just put a lot out on the table. He's referred to the question you raised, and we're about to look at the next few verses we probably could have before we stop. The question you raised is so important. Why couldn't this Malach, why couldn't Bil'am, this so-called prophet, see this messenger, this Malach, or this angel, when he is referred to elsewhere as a seer, S-E-E-R. He is the one who sees, but he can't see what a donkey, and it's not by accident that it's a donkey. Donkeys are known to be not smart animals, right? But this donkey can see it just fine. And suddenly we've got a talking donkey, which is really fun when you're working with kids, and actually harder when harder to look at as adults, but there's so much to it. Nina.
Okay. The donkeys actually within the population of the Hebrews was a very elementary, because their name Hebrew came from the word people who walks with donkeys, because they were leading caravans. That's how they made their living. And a lot of the names of the places that you see in the Bible, in the Torah, are places that this is where they trading stations. So actually, we came from a nation of people that were caravan leaders and leading the caravans with donkeys in the beginning. So it was the donkey at that point was a very integrated part of the culture. And actually, there's their, how would you call it? Their business, their making a living, their existence. So listening to the donkey talk, it's like they were living with the donkeys all the time. It became like a part of this whole being, and that even the animal could see that they were living in peace, because that was what he saw. So a simple man like that could understand that why should you curse people that live so peacefully and doesn't threat anybody?
Beautiful. I think there's a lesson in that.
Anybody.
There's a lesson
I think
in
the
that.
combination of the donkey and the person, it makes him, he was not one of the Hebrews. It makes him like feeling like he's one of them. That's why they're showing the donkey and the person, this whole being of who they were.
Oh,
now
nice.
he's not somebody who identifies with them.
Very
That's
nice.
why to bring
Very
in the
nice.
donkey in here.
Very
and
nice.
not the camel.
And the
whatever.
donkey can
The word Hebrew actually means donkey leaders, caravan leaders.
Oh, look at that. Very
Yeah.
nice.
That's according to William Albright.
So I love
He
that.
takes this from archaeology.
Great. Oh, I love that. I love
Okay.
that. There's perspective here. Openness to seeing that Bil'am either can't see or is not willing to see. And that, I think, is where we go with this. So let's look at a couple more verses, and then I have some commentary for you. This is the part that we know. Then, after the third time, Adonai opened the ass's mouth, and she said to Bil'am, "What have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times?" Bil'am said, "You've made a mockery out of me. If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you." Right? He has completely lost all of his patience and all of his, I don't know, my higher level like thinking and be in his ability to let his conscience lead. So the ass then said to Bil'am, "Look, I'm the one who you've been riding all along until this day. Have I been in the habit of doing thus to you?" And he said, "No." Then, and only then, Adonai uncovered Bil'am's eyes. And the word for uncovered here, I'll highlight it, vayigal, is the same word gilui for to reveal, right? Adonai uncovered Bil'am's eyes. So God did it. Don't let that get lost. And he saw the messenger of Adonai standing in the way, his drawn sword in his hand. Thereupon he bowed down to the ground, he being Balaam. The donkey spoke to him, and finally he heard, and only when he heard was he able to see. Now, want to look again, going back to our original questions about what is he a prophet and what makes him a prophet and why does any of that matter to us? A couple of commentaries, the first from the 13th century sage Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pakuda, who looks at the phrase specifically, "You've made a mockery out of me," right? This is when Balaam has lost his temper with the donkey who refused to move when the light turned green, right? And he gets so mad. And the commentary from Rabbeinu Bachya is this: as we pointed out already, Balaam should have expressed his amazement at the ass's sudden ability to speak to him. However, Balaam was so intent on reaching his destination and accomplishing his evil intent that he related to the ass's speaking with utter naivete, taking the phenomenon for granted and conversing with the ass as if unequal. Okay, so I want to stop there for a moment. What is it that Bachya ibn Pakuda is saying specifically about Balaam here? What didn't he hear or see? What was the revelation? And go ahead.
It seems like this prophet or false prophet, Balaam, he became irrational. He showed his humanity by not, by getting so agitated and not seeing this crazy thing, this donkey talking. So he sort of revealed himself as flawed and maybe not a superpower prophet.
Right. Okay, oh yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Can we go back to that?
I was just about to put it back up on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, just what was so amazing, the interpretation. He was, I guess, his amazement, his senses of amazement that the ass could speak to him. And he starts, what I was thinking is sometimes with my dogs, I would talk to the dog, not that the dog ever talk. Not that the dog ever talked back to me, although sometimes they did, they'd yap back, but it was a kind of, oh, there, Cindy's bringing her puppy.
There you go.
So she can talk to him or her, and there's some kind of connection then. And I know the dog, well, interestingly, the dog could feel my feelings. They do have emotions, but I don't know, it totally understood the words, but some of them got to, so that's what I'm thinking might be the phenomenon here.
I think you raise a really interesting point, and I'm going to broaden it, right? Perhaps there is a lesson here for Balaam, the narrowness. I mean, I think it's so interesting that with the 3 times that the donkey stops, the space just keeps getting, like the world is closing in on him. It's getting narrower and narrower and narrower until he can't ignore the donkey anymore. But I think that it is perhaps a lesson in the inverse, that we ought to open our eyes and our eyes and our ears and really our minds and our souls to learning from people or beings that we think we have nothing to learn from. I can tell you, last night I was sitting reading this and it was, I don't know, 7:30 or something like that. And my dog, who's 90 pounds and as big as, 100 pounds and as big as I am, sat right down in front of me, and it was late. It was at 7:30 or something. He eats at 5, and he stared at me, and he was telling me that nobody had fed him yet, but he communicated there was no missing that one, right? But I think there's something here. The other piece of this commentary from Rabbeinu Bachya that really is powerful to me is this second line where he says, Bilam was so intent on reaching his destination and accomplishing his evil intent that he didn't see it, right? And I often approach the text as a pop psychologist. I'm not trained in it, but from a psychological perspective, right? He was on the road to do what he knew God did not want him to do. He was on his way to do the wrong thing. And he just had to put on his blinders and just keep going. And that was ultimately never going to work. The donkey was never going to allow that to happen, because the donkey, with wisdom to show, with wisdom to offer, saw God, right? It was God's messenger standing there. And Bilam was not ready to see it. Donna, I see your hand. I want to just look at this one more commentary and then we'll stop and talk some more.
Okay.
And his relative contemporary, Nachmanides, or the Ramban, commented on a different part of that little section where it says, then Adonai uncovered Bilam's eyes, right? It wasn't Bilam just opened his eyes. God uncovered them. And Nachmanides says, from this verse, we learn that Bilam was not a prophet who habitually received divine messages, because had he been a prophet, how could it be that he required an opening or uncovering of the eyes to see the angel, which is the term used by scripture about someone who has not reached the degree of prophecy, right? So Nachmanides is saying, maybe not, because a real prophet doesn't just speak. A real prophet has his eyes or her eyes open to be able to see. And here, Bilam needed God to do that for him. Okay, Donna, go ahead.
I have a question to throw out there for thought. I'm not saying anything but this. Yeshua came into Jerusalem on a donkey. He was in hell, according to the other words, okay, because one of my rabbi's mama used to be a preacher. I just want to say he was in hell for what, 3 days? This guy gets struck 3 times. What are you gonna do? Kill me? I want everyone to think about that. Just think about it, because we say in Shabbat every Friday we say all the names, and we say Yeshua, which is Hebrew for salvation. And I love Israel. I'm Jewish and never not going to be Jewish. You are my people. Even Howard Stern's a believer. I'm going to leave it at that. I love you. And Rabbi Leah says, I don't care who you call on, just call whoever you believe in. Like I have, it's more beautiful than before. And this is my temple, and you're my people. I love you. And Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi. I just want to say that.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the main element of prophecy is interpretation. And to me, this is a failure on Balaam's part of interpretation. And what this is, in a sense, telling us is that the only surety in receiving a prophecy is if it comes directly from God, because we are all fallible in our ability to interpret the messages that are being sent.
Great. Thank you. Right. And that ultimately prophecy is, to have that message to send from God, and this is where it gets sticky when we look around the world today. When the Torah tells us that God spoke to him or God opened his eyes, we can trust that. What happens when the guy down the street says, you know what? God spoke to me directly and I heard. What do? We lock him up, right? So it's a tricky business. And yet, if we have our blinders on, then too much, and we don't open our eyes and our ears, we risk missing the messages we need to hear, not even the ones we necessarily want to hear, because as we, said before, oftentimes the messages from the prophets are horrible things to hear, the really hard truths. Merle, go ahead.
I'm thinking, I think Brad just hit the nail on the head when he said interpretation failure. I think from the very beginning of this discussion till what we just read and what Brad just said is we all interpret any kind of prophecy differently. And I think the biggest problem any of us have is how we interpret what someone else who claims to be a prophet says, and how we would think of ourselves as something we might say might happen or is going to happen or whatever, including when we say, well, if you do this, this is going to happen, or this won't happen. You can't do it this way. But I look at it all as how each of us as an individual interpret what could be a prophecy.
Right.
And I guess that's always been my problem when somebody or something claims to be a prophet is how do we all, whether we're all in this room or all over the globe, how do we interpret what someone or somebody or some talking donkey or dog has said? How do we interpret it and be in the right place?
I would even make that a two-part question. The first part of your question, or a double question. Let me rephrase that, right? The first question, you can just take the word how out of your question. Do we interpret what somebody says to someone who claims they're a prophet? And then, if so, how? How do we do it, right? And it's really, really, it's frightening because of the power that gets yielded. Think about the messages of these prophets. I go back, right? I mean, Jeremiah. I mean, all of them. We don't need to go through them, right? And so here is this guy, Bilam, the one, thank you, Benina, without an without a people. He's not part of the Israelites, right? And yet he has a lot to say. And he has the Torah tells us that he has this communication with God. But Balak, remember, he was brought on board by Balak. Balak is so focused on getting Bilam to curse the Israelites. He was going to stop at nothing, and he was bringing Bilam along. And then Bilam has these conversations, right, where he's reminded that what he's being brought on to do is absolutely wrong and not pleasing to God. And then I'm watching the clock. So Penina, give me just a moment, if you will. I want us to skip ahead to a couple chapters later to a section that will be familiar to some of you, at least, probably many of you. Now Bilam, seeing that it pleased Adonai to bless Israel. Remember, in between the last section and this section, Bilam got all the structures. He put everything in place, built the altars, did everything, put Bilam, put him up like a marionette to do his work, got him all set up to do his work, and he didn't do it. And then he tried again. And now Bilam, seeing that it pleased Adonai to bless Israel, did not, as on previous occasions, go in search of omens, but he turned his face toward the wilderness. As Bilam looked up and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. Taking up his theme, he said, "Word of Bilam, son of Beor, word of the man whose eye is true, word of one who hears God's speech." He's giving his own accolades as a prophet, who beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate, but with eyes unveiled, right? I am humble, but my eyes are wide open now. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How good or how fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. This is what he ultimately utters instead of a curse. Does that phrase "Ma tovu" sound familiar? From
I
the
love it.
right from the morning service. It is the words with we have talked about take it and twist it. The Jewish people have taken that and put it in our Siddur, in our prayer book, and said, you know what, every morning we say this. And in fact, it's tradition to say it when you're approaching the synagogue and you can see it from afar. You say, how lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. So talk about a coup gone awry. This is what we have here. But I
Thank
want
you, Rabbi Leah. Thank you, Rabbi
Sure, my
Leah.
pleasure. I want to look at a couple more things as again, I'm watching the clock, specifically thinking about what this his blindness, and then not too long later, still in this Torah portion, his eyes unveiled, and what comes out is this blessing. So the Toldot Yaakov Yosef, 19th century commentary, asks the same question that we've been asking. He says, what is the difference between true and false prophets? True prophets, in most cases, come to rebuke the people. They point out the blemishes and the deficiencies of the people and seek to have them mend their ways. False prophets tell the people how wonderful they are and that there's nothing that needs to be rectified. True lovers of their people, though, are true prophets. Thus, we see that when Bilam praised Israel, it was because he did not want them to improve themselves, right? So we can give Bilam all the kudos we want. Our tradition is not letting him off so easily. There was some ulterior motive, says Toldot Yaakov Yosef. He told them that they were perfect and there was nothing left for them to mend. That was the difference between him and the true prophets of Israel. Now, for us who live in a universalistic kind of world, this can feel very offensive. I know, because why can't we give the guy some credit? So just know that this, part of our tradition wants to defend the Israelites and is still a little weary of those who are unknown. I think there's some truth to this, but I question a little bit more. So I want to turn to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. He says, the false prophet speaks. The true prophet listens. The false prophet tells people what they want to hear. The true prophet tells them what they need to hear. The false prophet believes in his own powers. The true prophet knows that he has no power. The false prophet speaks in his own voice. The true prophet speaks in a voice not his. Again, not an easy job. So Ben, can you remind me, what was the question that you asked before that I said, please make sure we get back to it?
About business titans or great scientists or Nobel laureates, are they in a way prophets?
So are they in a way prophets? I lean toward the teaching of Rabbi Sacks, as often is the case. He was an amazing mind and communicator. What do you think, given what we just kind of uncovered for ourselves, unveiled for ourselves? Susan, go ahead.
So I would answer no, they're not prophets. They're creative individuals. And creativity is something different. They're out to explore, in Einstein's case, the universe, and there are others. But I love Rabbi Sacks's brilliant interpretation. But I will say this, I had read some of Jonathan Heschel's, Abraham Joshua Heschel's interpretation of prophecy. And often, and I spoke to artists, when they feel a painter, his creativity coming, he feels like it's from some other space. It's not just him or her, and it's coming from somewhere they don't know. And one might call it the zone, being in the zone. But sometimes I felt it too when I was in a creative phase. I thought, where did this come from? I didn't know this word before, and here it's popping into my brain, and I'm writing this or I'm painting this. So I think there can be an element of inspiration, even divine inspiration, but abetting and awarding and aiding creativity. But I don't think those creative minds, Einstein you mentioned, and probably some other artists, they're not speaking truth to the people. They have their own insights for them that they themselves are pursuing, not castigating others.
Great, thank you. Nina.
I think that what they were trying to do is create awareness that the people should start getting the feel of what's going on. And that was like you light, like you when you light a match, it's like you have to call somebody to start looking around and assess what's going on. And that's exactly what they did. While they were doing it, they were also telling them what the consequences could be. But the whole idea was to actually wake up awareness. Don't feel like you got like God in your hands that you could do whatever you want.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I would offer as well that there's something very resonant here in our text and also in the Torah's text, but also the commentaries. There's a lot about seeing and about the eyes and the ears and the mouth, right? What did they see? What did they not see? What did Balaam didn't see, but the donkey did? And then God spoke, right? But the thing is that with all of those senses, there's input and there's output. God forbid we put out into the world, speak, and really in the case of the mouth, right? Without first having taken in the product of the awareness, right? The first step is to open our eyes and open our mind and hear. We've 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? To listen and pay attention and open our eyes. And it's regardless of physical ability, right? It's deeper than that. And then with the right awareness, we can put the right messages out into the world. But that is not saying that we're all prophets, because we're not. But to emulate the prophets who emulated God, ultimately it's one step removed. That's our job, right? To emulate that, to be open to the real prophets, to be open to input, and then be willing to use the output when it's not easy, right? You don't have to be a prophet to, to speak
To be
truth
aware.
to power. But God forbid we leave speaking truth to power to people who actually are prophets. There would be no truth told. So we need to do our part as well. Penina, last word.
Yeah, when you have a dog and the dog barks at your door, you know that somebody is there that you got to watch for.
Yeah.
If he's going to wig his tail, it's somebody that he knows, that he likes a lot. But if he stands there barking, he doesn't like it. Somebody is there to either harm you or something. So it doesn't do any difference to me whether he had a dog with him or a donkey that he listened to. And he was with this donkey all the time. People who herd sheep, when they can tell if one of the sheep is in trouble or whatever. So, or when she's about to give birth or something.
If you're paying attention.
So for him, the donkey was somebody that he lived with all the time. And if the donkey wasn't happy and wiggled around, he maybe interpreted it as, I don't want to go there.
Right. But at the beginning, he wasn't willing to pay attention to his donkey. And only after his eyes were opened, or in the context of opening his eyes and being willing for the input, could he see that, oh, right, this donkey is communicating something and I have been not paying attention all along. And now it's time to pay attention. All right, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat
That was
everybody.
great.
Shalom. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. And
Bye.
be good to your pets.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Love you. Thank
Thank
you, Rabbi
you.
Leah.
Bye-bye.
Yep.